Good afternoon, everyone. Today is the 10th talk in the Only One Theme talk series, which we are doing as a campaign around innovation management. This campaign is being organized by the TechX team at Venture Center. Today's topic in the Only One Theme is Only Technology Strategy, and the speaker for today is Dr. Hiran Vedam. Briefly introducing Dr. Vedam, Hiran is a business consultant for investors and startups, particularly in the climate tech domain. She is also Senior Advisor for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at IIT Tirupati. Hiran has considerable experience in different areas of lab-to-market journey, from research to entrepreneurship, technology transfer, and early-stage investments in the US, UK, Singapore, and India. She has a YouTube channel called WorldofDeeptech to familiarize young researchers on various aspects of commercializing advanced technologies. Hiran has developed a mentoring framework for guiding mentors of science-based startups in collaboration with a seasoned angel investor. Hiran is a BTech from IIT Madras. She is also MS from Washington University, MBA from NC, and she has a PhD in chemical engineering from Purdue University in the US. With this brief introduction, welcome Hiran to the session and over to you.
Thank you, Mugdha. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sharing my presentation. Can you see it clearly?
See the presentation also.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. Today, I'll be talking to you about technology strategy, specifically the strategy that one can adopt from a startup perspective when you're trying to translate technology from lab to market. So let's get started. Generally, the path from lab to market consists of the following steps. So you start with an idea in your lab, for which you would develop some technology, have a proof of principle that's in the lab that tells you that, okay, you have something that is worth commercializing. Then you would go through a proof of concept, a proof of value. A proof of concept is more of a scaled up version that validates some of the business performance metrics. And that is proven still in the lab, but more commercially relevant performance metrics. Then you move to proof of value, where you're actually trying the solution with the customer. Then move on to a product market fit, business model fit, and revenue and growth. So this is where your business is trying to figure out what is the product or service that you're going to be offering based on the technology you have developed in your lab, then trying to figure out what's the business model you can build around it so that you can be profitable and grow. And once you have nailed your product and your market and your business model, then you're ready for revenue and growth. So if you look at the journey and what are the various risks along the way, you start off with a very high technology risk. As you move on, you have a product risk and then a market risk. So these are the primary ones we talk about when we talk about lab to market journey. But those are not the only kind of risks that exist. So as the technology moves towards the market, you have the process risk, because as you're scaling up, you need to be able to produce your product or scale your service. So the processes that go along with it become important. The way your business is structured and operationalized, the operations risk become important. Then how you sell the product, how you market your product, there is a risk associated with it, and so on. So all these risks need to be mitigated over time in order to be successful in the business. Now, when we look at the lab to market journey, so I have deleted the feedback loops just to simplify the figure, but of course the feedback loops exist. And if you're familiar with the technology readiness levels, So as you move from your idea towards the market, the TRL levels increase. So by the time you finish your proof of value or so, you're at around TRL 7. The one that comes out of the lab is anywhere between TRL 1 to 4, and so on. So generally, the early stage of it, from lab to about proof of value, is what we call the technology development part of your journey. And then when you switch, when you have a proof of value, you have actually demonstrated the value to the customer. Then you start thinking about what's the product or service that you're going to be offering to your customers. And so it goes into product development, deployment, business models, and so on. And so there is that clear differentiation between the way the business is structured, the startup is structured when you're doing the proof of value, but when you transition over to the product and business, your business looks very different. The structure of your operations looks very different. All right. And what happens in the process is that you have reduced your technology risk. You have reduced your product risk as you move from proof of value towards business model. And similarly, you have also reduced the market risk. Okay, and if you look at the effort of the team as you move from lab to market, you see that at the proof of principle stage, it's mostly related to technology with a little bit of familiarity around market. Okay, so you're starting to think about, well, is there a market? How big is the market? And so those kind of questions. And as you go towards the proof of concept and proof of value, the amount of time that the team spends on developing the technology itself comes down considerably as a part of the overall effort. Okay, even within proof of concept, you're still pretty much focused on technology development, but there is more emphasis on market, and there is starting to be a lot more emphasis on process, because now you need to figure out how you're going to scale up the process, or how are you going to be able to produce 10 of these widgets, or how are you going to deploy your service in 10 different places. So you're starting to think about your processes a lot more. And by the time you have done your proof of value, clearly you're starting to think about what is the product, how is it delivering the value to the customer, what is the value proposition to the customer, and so on. And when the trace transition happens between proof of value and product market fit, what you're seeing is that the technology development is almost done. There is probably some minor tweaks you're doing, but pretty much that's done. And you're starting to look at your market and your process at a much higher granularity. And product takes a majority of your effort. What is the product like? What are the features? What is the cost? Where are you going to get the components? All of these discussions around product become a lot more deeper and a lot more granular at that stage. And of course, as your product market fit is established and you're going to scale up, there is a lot more attention being paid to your operations. Okay, what are my supply chains going to look like? How am I going to manage my inventory? How am I going to manage my people and finances? So all these operations things become important, along with the other market and product and process. So this is looking more like a traditional business compared to what you started off with, which looked more like a lab or a semi-lab kind of stuff, moving slowly into business kind of stuff. All right, so the key question is, do we need to follow through all these steps when we are trying to build a lab to market, when we are going through the lab to market journey? When do we need to go through all these steps, and what steps can be skipped when? So that's kind of the discussion we will get into. So, I mean, first thing to look at is, are all the technologies the same? Obviously, they're not. So there are technologies that are what we call platform technologies that can go into different products in different domains. And so this is like more upstream technology that we can look at. So examples of these are like, take for example, graphene material. If you're looking at graphene material, it can go into water purification, it can go into electronics, it can go into semiconductors, it can go into all kinds of different applications, right? So that's a platform technology. And if you're trying to commercialize that, then the approach you would take is very different than if you're looking at something, a technology that goes into one product, but maybe, so for example, you have a new material that goes into a membrane. And that membrane can be used in water purification, it can be used in gas purification, gas separation, for example, or in some other application. So that would be treated very differently, right? So for example, if you take drones, I mean, the drones as such are the same, but the application specific knowledge would need to be incorporated to ensure that the sizing is right, the sizing of the battery, how the drone flies, and all of this, right? So there is the same product going into different domains. And then there are much downstream technologies, for which there is one product that you can, based on that technology, you can develop one product that goes into one market. So for example, waste to concrete. So there are a number of companies that are taking, like, for example, plastic waste and converting it into like bricks or some kind of concrete, paver blocks and so on. So that's a much downstream technology that may not need to go through all these steps, okay? Another way to look at how how different technologies look is that in some cases, you may have something of a core innovation you have, and you need different pieces of other technologies that need to come in order to commercialize them. Or in some cases, this core technology needs to plug into existing system with different pieces that are coming in. Okay, so let's look at it, think of it slightly differently. Or, sorry, before we go do that, let's look at this. So, sometimes there is a path to the development of your core innovation. But as you're developing it, there might be side applications that you can develop along the way. And that's one way to look at it. Okay, so another way to think about it is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Okay, and that problem, the solution or the technology to solve that problem may already exist. Okay, so you're just taking it, creating a product out of it to solve that specific problem. That's one kind of, solving a problem, right? The another way to solve the problem is that, okay, there is a solution or an innovation that's available in some other domain, and you're trying to take that and apply it to this particular domain, this particular solution, okay? Another way to look at it is that, well, you want to solve this problem, but no solution exists currently, and you have to find new technologies or new innovations need to happen in order to do this. For example, today, if we want to do cost-effective carbon capture, the solutions don't exist, right? Especially if you want to do direct air capture. So those innovations need to be developed, validated, and deployed. So those are they need to go all the 9 yards. But a solution that exists already exists, that needs to be customized for this particular problem, may be easier to deploy, maybe deployed tomorrow. So that's let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So if you take the case of problem, the solution to the problem exists in some form, and you just need to piece it together for for solving that particular problem. In that case, you probably don't need to go through your proof of concept, your lab scale proof of principle, proof of concept, proof of value. You can directly do the product market fit. Those of you who are familiar with the lean launchpad approach, for example, you know what happens there. So you already know which market you have technology is taken as given, and you're just piecing it together and seeing whether it works in the lab. So you can do your MVP, minimum viable product cycles, and quickly see if there is a product market fit and do the scale up and revenue and growth. So here you're already starting with early adopters in your customer base. So you don't need to go with the innovators, because the early adopters are already pretty geared up to accept a solution that comes into the market. Okay. And here the emphasis is on customer discovery, customer requirements, and saying what is that product that I can build that will provide, scalable, clear deliverables to the customer. Okay. So this is pretty straightforward. This is the kind of stuff that most of you who are familiar with the lean launchpad approach know how to do. And the risk is primarily in the market in this case. The technology risk is fairly minimized. So this is what we wouldn't classify as a deep tech. So then there is this case of, the technology exists in some other domain, you have to bring it back. This is not always straightforward. Okay. In this case, maybe you don't need to do a proof of concept because, it's already proven somewhere else. You just need to prove the value in this particular domain, the customer in this particular domain. So it might be fairly easier. So you could skip the proof of concept stage and go directly to a proof of value stage. Okay. So then you go to product market fit, and business model fit and so on. So there you're not going through the entire experimental validation, or you probably don't even need to do a proof of principle because you're pretty clear how it's supposed the technology looks like. Okay. Here, but because there is that domain risk, people may still you might want to go after the innovators in your customer base because the early adopters may not be ready for you at this stage. Okay, and then you have to go through looking at which products fit into which customers, and then trying to figure out what are the performance metrics that are important for each of these customers, and coming up with the technology requirements based on that, and then developing your proof of value, and then going down the road. So this would be more involved, more time consuming. There is still substantial technology risk and product risk that we need to reduce before you can go to the next stages. Okay, here the level of risk is based on 3 parameters. One is what technologies you're bringing in, what applications are you putting it to, and how much market and domain specific information would alter the way in which it is applied. So based on that, it would be either deep tech or may not be deep tech. So if it is just application, maybe not so, but in some cases, the depth of the domain knowledge required is so high that it would require substantial effort and substantial risk in commercializing them. So for example, if you developed an AI system that works well in a chemical plant, for example, and you want to take that AI system and apply it in a medical domain, it's not straightforward because the domain knowledge that's required in a chemical plant is very, very different than the domain knowledge that's required for a healthcare system or in the medical domain, right? So even though the underlying machine learning or AI system may be the same, because of the application and because of the level of differences in the domain knowledge, it might still be substantially challenging to apply it in this domain and requiring significant expertise and significant risk in terms of deployment. Then you have this case of, I don't know how to solve this, but this needs to be solved. Where do I start? So here, you pretty much need to go through the entire journey of coming up with your basic research, doing maybe a proof of concept, proof of value, and then going down the product market, business model fit, and so on. So this really is required when you have to establish that what you have done has, what you're developing has that significant customer advantage or competitive advantage over what exists in the market, right? So, for example, in the DAC systems today, one of the challenges is the cost and the energy that we are using. And in order to be able to reduce the cost and reduce the amount of energy we need to use, if any solution can show that, that would be a real game changer, right? And so these innovations generally fall into either what we call the breakthrough innovations or the disruptive innovations. The difference being disruptive don't necessarily mean technically challenging. It's more disrupting the market by going after those customers that are not under getting a lot of attention from the incumbents and kind of making inroads that way. Okay, so here you are talking about substantially deep technologies that require the long incubation time potentially and a significant effort. Now, when we do a proof of value, what we have is some technology and some IP, some know-how, right? And this you can commercialize through multiple ways. Okay, you could say, okay, I would license this to innovation to a third party. Okay, I don't want to develop it myself because I mean I've done the proof of value. I've demonstrated the value to a customer. Now it's not my job to build a business around it. I'll just license it to somebody else. That's one part. The second part is that you decide to build the whole product, take it to the market, and build a business around it. So that's the second way you can create impact from this innovation. Then sometimes what happens is when you take it to a proof of value, the customer feedback and the effort it took to do the proof of value tells you that maybe this is not the right time to actually take this to the market, either through licensing or through building a product yourself. So you might decide to put it on the shelf while you develop the other pieces to make it commercially viable solution. Or in some cases, it might have worked very well in the lab. It doesn't work in the field. So in which case, you're back to the drawing board where you have to go, right? So how are these decisions made? I don't want to delve too deep into this at this stage, but so I'll just quickly walk you through this. We can discuss any questions related to it during Q&A if you have. Okay, so generally the decision on whether to license it or spin off is based on whether the inventors or the initial team that's developing the solution is interested in creating a business around it. If so, then it makes sense. Otherwise, then probably you're better off just licensing the technology. And how easy is it to bundle it and give it to somebody else to take to be able to do that relay race, right? Sometimes it is fairly easy, sometimes it's not. If it's easy, you can license it to somebody else so that, you like a relay race, you have handed it over to somebody else who can, take it forward. But in some cases, it's not possible, especially in biotech, in climate tech. It's very difficult to just hand it over the fence and expect somebody else to run with it. So then it becomes very difficult to just license it without that long overlap period of technology transfer. Then there is the TRL level, right? If it is the TRL level is high, then licensing is easier because somebody else can take it and run with it. But if it's a low TRL solution, then probably the market won't be ready, first of all. And it's also very hard to take it. So then you have to, as a spin-off, build it up to a stage where it is ready for that, handover. And absorption capacity. So part of the part of the challenge in licensing is that whoever the incumbent who is licensing it should have the ability to absorb what you're giving them and take it forward. And that's what I describe as the absorption capacity. If the incumbents have that absorption capacity, then you can license it and walk away. But in many cases, like for example, in many situations in India, it's not easy to license the technology to a large company and expect that they know what to do with it. And that's where a spin-off is a better idea than licensing it. The other thing is the market value. Sometimes if the technology is addressing the burning challenges of the incumbents in terms of either reducing their costs or increasing their profits, increasing their operation efficiency and so on, then the market value is clear. So then licensing becomes easier. But if you're trying to come up with a solution that whose market value is unproven, then it becomes, so for example, if you're trying to do something related to carbon capture, unless there is a mandate for a company to reduce their carbon footprint, either from their shareholders or from the government, or from their customers, there is no reason for them to do that. So the market value for such a solution is very unclear, which means it's very difficult to commercialize those easily. Okay, so the pause part, let's come back to it after we go through all this list. Okay, then the performance versus the incumbent, where the technology is better than what's in the market, it's an easy sell. Sometimes it might start out as an inferior solution, but can get better over time. An example is your electric vehicle, right? Electric vehicles for a long time, I mean, now they're getting better, had shorter ranges, they would take a long time to charge and so on. So compared to an ICE engine that exists in the market, the performance is considered lower, which means it's very difficult to get an existing player to license that technology. If otherwise it's easy. Okay, so then are we targeting a market that exists or a market that's new? So many of these solutions, like for climate tech, if you look at it, like cement, green hydrogen, all of these are trying to target an existing market. So if you come up with a new solution, then it's easier to adopt. Okay, but let's say you came up with a new material for water purification. The market may not be always very clear, and then it becomes very challenging. The other thing to look at is whether funding is available or unavailable. If it's available, then yeah, spin-off makes sense. The other thing, so now switching to the pause area. So if the market value is unproven and funding is unavailable and the inventor interest is low, then you're kind of left with pausing the whole thing and waiting for something else to happen. Or if the market value is unproven, irrespective of any irrespective of any other thing, we would probably pause it and see where you can come up with a situation where the market value makes sense. All right. Now,
so Hiran, there was a question on your earlier slide. Can we take it?
Sure.
Yeah, so on your earlier slide, Pankaj wants to know, can we use similar criteria for collaboration if you want to develop a technology? So you have listed certain criteria.
Yeah. Yes, you can think about it. I mean, see, technology collaboration, in a collaboration, the consideration is what do you have? What does the other party bring to the table? And what happens to the outcome of what you develop together, right? You can use similar framework, but not exactly this, because there the considerations are slightly different. You're really, I mean, if you're a spin-off trying to, and probably something worth discussing, and it's not something I can do on a chat. If Pankaj wants to elaborate on by unmuting himself, happy to discuss this.
Yeah, Pankaj, you can 1 minute. Yeah. Unmute yourself.
Hi, and good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah. So, like, I was pretty, find out insightful the criteria which you mentioned in relation to the call when we have to take for licensing or spin-off. So, because when we collaborate with different kind of vendors, we also evaluate certain criterias. So, just wanted to know what are certain, like you rightly said that the condition for tech development is entirely different in comparison to licensing and all these things. So if we have to look out, what are the criteria for technology development? So can you share some insight on that?
Yeah, really, in terms of collaboration, what you're looking for is, I mean, what do you have? I mean, whenever you're collaborating with somebody else, you're giving up something. You're, of course, getting something, but you're also giving up something substantial. So
it's
generally,
something.
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. So like it's majorly related to something conditions which we don't know. So like for example, we don't know what's going to come for after 10 years in the automobile market, but we want to collaborate with some AI related startup or something like that. So there are a lot of factors which are not known to us. So in certain situations, how to take a call, especially in terms of tech development.
So I mean, in this particular case, I mean, you want to collaborate just to kind of keep an eye on what's happening in that particular field. Is that what your intention is?
Yes.
Okay, so then it's, I mean, you could just do an investment. That's one way. So I mean, larger companies can do this two ways. One is to invest into the startup, so you have a good view of what's happening as they are developing and as they're providing updates, and you can use that as an opportunity. The other one is to develop a specific project, collaboration project, right? In the collaboration project, I mean, a startup would be interested in collaborating with you because you're probably, I mean, potentially a larger player who can give access to the market for them. But what they may be, what you would be getting is access to the what they're doing, right? I mean, get a view of what they're doing. So in that case, really, it's, I mean, what happens to the technology that you develop together? Are you going to be commercializing it, or is the startup going to be commercializing it, or is it just like you just want a look, but you want the startup to be continuing to do that. So that's the kind of decision making you have to make. I mean, do you want to own the technology, or you just want to scan the technology? If it's scanning, you can still collaborate with them and let them have the IP ownership so that they can build it up, but you may get some preferential access to the solutions they're developing as it fits with your roadmaps. That makes sense?
Yeah, thanks, Hiran. I think you can move on. If there's anything else, we can reach out here.
Yeah, we can do that offline. Okay. So sometimes when you're developing, going through the lab to market, it is not just enough to just say, okay, proof of principle, proof of concept, all this linear way, because there are a lot of things that need to be developed along the way. Okay. So for example, if you have developed a material, in order to even start doing your experimental development, you need to make sure that you can produce this material in reasonable amount of quantities. So that is one criteria, and you need to be able to produce this material of consistent quality, without degradation, and it should also be safe to dispose of when you're done using them. So some of these basic things about the material, they are not related to proof of principle, but these need to be there in order for you to be able to do a proof of concept, right? And you have to have probably some specialized equipment you may need in order to scale up the production of this material. And you need to figure out how you're going to do this scale up too, right? Once you have that, you now have the ability to produce this material in reasonable quantities in a replicable manner, right? Then you're probably ready to do experimental development. So which means it is not enough to just say, okay, I have proven this technology in the lab in a proof of principle stage, and I can start to talk about commercial deployment and trying to figure out what are the performance metrics in the commercial scale. Sometimes there is a lot more work that needs to be done even before you can build a first proof of concept. And this is especially true in materials domain, where you're talking about let's say you have developed a material for water purification that you produced in the lab. Okay, before you can actually make a few filters that you can demonstrate the value to the customer, or demonstrate that it can run consistently for 600 hours or 500 hours and so on, you need to be able to produce that material at a reasonable scale. You need to be able to be assured that it is safe, it is reliable, and it is consistent. All of these basic things needs to be sorted, and that journey is different for different kinds of technologies. Okay, so the other thing to think about is that sometimes your product is not something that an end user will use directly. There are a number of intermediate steps. What do I mean by that? So let's take the material example. Now, we said that, if we look at a material that needs to go on a solar panel to increase the efficiency of a solar panel, let's say. Now, in order for that to happen, this material needs to go into some sort of a solution. You need to figure out how you're going to, coat it on a surface. And you need to figure out how you're going to scale that coating on a consistent manner in larger quantities so that it can be actually put on a solar panel that goes on our roof, right? So there are a number of these steps. And these may not be, there are different players who may be coming in between you and this end user that is going to see the benefit of what you're doing, right? So these are all the auxiliary technologies that need to be developed by somebody, either you or some other party, right? So, and the path you take in order to commercialize these will really depend on a few factors. One is that, is the product so different for different customers? How different is the product for different customers? So that's one consideration. So for example, if you take the membrane, a membrane, this membrane can go into like a separation of in the milk industry, maybe wastewater industry, or maybe gas industry, and it can go into a purification unit or separation unit, right? But a membrane that is used for water purification is slightly different than a membrane that's used for water, a milk separation, or, that's used in gas separation. So there, the decision on which market you go to has to be made fairly early on, even before, you've developed the whole solution. In some cases, the decision on which markets or which customers you target can be postponed to a later date. Okay. And this is because, the same thing may be going into different markets at different scales. So, for example, if you take a membrane that goes into a fuel cell, this stack, the smaller one may be used in your vehicle. A larger one would be used in your, a plant that is serving a telecom tower. And even a larger one would be serving, some stationary applications. So depending on, but the core technology can be developed to a larger extent before you start thinking about which market you go into. So the decision on which one you go to can be delayed in this case. Okay, and the other factor is also there is a significant amount of money and time involved between these different stages, right? So what we are trying to do here is figuring out what is the path between. So, earlier when I started, I said, well, you have the intellectual property, you would develop your product, and there is the customer. But as we double click on it, we see that there are a number of steps that need to happen between your technology and your product, and between your product and your customer. And there are all these other pieces that need to come together before this path can, this technology reaches the end customer. Now, we can separate this into two. So remember, we said that there is the technology development cycle. So we can call all those steps that happen in that as the technology value chain. And what happens later is the market value chain, right? And as a startup, you want to be able to develop your technology to a stage where a larger incumbent can take it and run with it, right? So for example, just now Pankaj was talking about, well, we want to keep an eye on it. We are not quite ready. But a company like his may be having the market reach that the spin-off doesn't have, may have other pieces that can come together that the spin-off may not have. So in that case, a spin-off should be able to develop it up to that point where a larger company can take and run with it. And this differs for different technologies, right? For the membrane one, it is fairly early on. For the fuel cell case, it's much later because the spin-off can develop it up to a later stage and then give it to different markets, like, somebody targeting your vehicle market, somebody targeting your stationary applications, and so on. But in the earlier case, they have to make the decision fairly early on and bring in a collaborator fairly early in the development cycle. So that point where a spin-off needs to start attracting corporations is what I would call a decoupling point. Mugdha, I want to pause here and see if there are any questions or anything before we move on, because the next few slides are related to the strategies around how the spin-off can figure out whom to partner with and so on.
Yeah, so right now there are no more questions other than what you just answered, so we can move on.
Okay, sure. So the spin-off, I mean, we've seen, different kinds of prototypical technologies, and we have seen different areas or challenges that you need to be aware of. Now let's look at, if you are a spin-off or a startup, looking at your development plan, what are some of the strategies you can use to increase your success when you're especially thinking about collaboration with corporates. Okay, so or taking your technology to the market. So in the case of in a situation where you have one product that can be used to target multiple customers, then you might say, why can't I target all these multiple markets at the same time? That's the general thing I hear when I talk to startups. Well, I can target electric vehicle market, I can target the genset market, I can target stationary storage, all these applications, right? So you can do that, but it can be quite resource intensive, because every time you try to enter a market, build your business case in those markets and make yourself create your customer base in those markets, it takes a lot of effort. And as technologies, we tend to not think too much about it or try to minimize that, but in reality that probably takes as much, if not more, effort than it took to develop the core innovation, right? So it's quite resource intensive, and it is quite risky, because you're trying to be jack of all trades without getting anywhere, and that's quite a risky strategy for you to adopt. The other one is, well, I do realize that there are multiple markets, but I don't want to be doing that. I just want to be licensing the technology to all these multiple players, and I just want to sit back and collect the royalty revenue without actually building the products myself. It's low risk, but it's also low revenue, because depending on the technology readiness level of what you have, you could be getting very, very little royalty, and you're basically dependent on the others to be successful in the market. Then there is the third strategy, which is called the niche strategy. So here what you do is that instead of trying to capture the entire market at the same time, what you do is you're swimming with the sharks, but instead of trying to attack the same markets as the sharks or the incumbents that are already there, you try to go after those markets that you can with the current stage of maturity of your solution. And and as you mature, as you get your foothold, you try to expand the customer base and the solution offering you can create. So for example, a few years ago, drones were mainly used for, taking, wedding pictures and that kind of stuff, because they had limited battery capacity. They could only fly over short distances and so on. So, but that was a market that was very small, but, created enough of a momentum for you to be able to create a solution and make a business out of it and generate some revenue. But as we got, as the technology improved, as the battery capacities increased, and as we knew how to build better motors and better drones, we have moved away from that to now delivering packages from one place to another, to going forward thinking about transporting humans from one place to another, right? So this is niche strategy. The advantage of that is that you require lower investment because you're starting to generate revenue from the get-go, and you have reasonable returns. So an investor looking at you says, well, I mean, this is not so risky because I'm able to get some return um, early on. And but there is a dependency risk because you have to see how the market evolves. Now, all these are what you're already seeing in the Indian market. Now, if you go to the ecosystem approach, which is trying to develop your ecosystem and trying to take sort of high impact, high risk technologies to the market, here you need slightly different approach. Here, it's not enough to say, well, I mean, I will license it, or I will try to do everything, or to go niche, because it does take the time it takes to get to the market. And you need different pieces to come together in order for this to be successful. So here, I mean, you're probably still connected to the parent lab, because that's where you're getting your intellectual property, your facilities. You may be part of your team as you're growing. And you may also need to use other labs that are closer to where you're doing your prototypes and so on. And there, you may be getting some complementary IP and maybe some facilities, and also potentially your team, right? You may also need to collaborate with other startups because they are offering complementary solutions to what you are providing. And that provides a way for you to get to the market faster. Government, because the policies are probably have not been decided, or government is itself trying to promote those areas. For example, green hydrogen today, I mean, there's a lot of engagement required. And not too long ago, EVs too, right? There was a lot of engagement required with the government, because the policies around, the infrastructure required, the regulations required, all of these are still evolving. And government also is trying to put together consortia like the Hydrogen Valley projects that are happening now. They can help you find partners. They are providing funding to do this, and they're still trying to figure out what regulation works in the country, so you can provide inputs for that. And then there are the corporates, because here the markets, the corporates can provide market access, market information, know-how, maybe open up their facilities to do some of your, first of a kind deployments, or, prototype developments and so on, and help you scale up, because they know that very well, how to scale up the technology. So for all these reasons, the ecosystem approach can be quite effective, especially in cases where you have multiple products going into multiple customer base from the core technology that you have developed. And so you can, and in order to do this, you need to be clear on the identity. Sorry, you have to have a clear identification of who those corporate customers are, and what is the right value chain that you can go after. And so the choice of the value chain should be based not just on the attractiveness of the market, but also availability of the right industrial ecosystem, and the willingness of the potential partners to add value. So when you take a core technology that has multiple that can be a basis for developing multiple products to multiple markets. One of the key things you have to do in deciding which markets you go after is understanding which of these is attractive, where do you have the ecosystem for building this, and where is the willingness for the potential partners to actually collaborate and bring together. So you have to choose that. So, I mean, that's one of the struggles for most of the people who are now looking at the hydrogen market is whom can we go after? Do we go after green ammonia? Do we go after SAF? Which markets do we go after and why? And so this is some of the analysis that can help do that. Okay, but in collaborating with corporates, spin-off should also be very careful, because on the positive side, collaborating with corporates give the startups credibility, and it helps them get some revenue streams from the IP licensing and collaboration agreements. And corporate partners can also help reduce the time it takes, because they can give you timely feedback, and so the product development can happen at a much faster pace than otherwise. It also provides the spin-off with the ability to establish influence across the value chain, and this kind of, it also allows them to commercialize the invention in more than one value chain. But on the downside, you are opening up your intellectual property to the corporates, and this is something that has its own inherent risk, and it may narrow down the focus of the spin-off based on where the incumbent is looking at. It will make it vulnerable to the corporate's fluctuations in terms of market value, in terms of their own internal challenges, and so on. And sometimes it may delay market entry, because as the spin-off solution may be something the corporate is looking at keep watch rather than actively wanting to commercialize, right? So in that case, they are eternally delaying decision making, and that might hurt the spin-off. So keeping all this in mind, the spin-off has to try to work with multiple corporates so that they minimize some of these risks while still being able to take advantage of what the corporates can bring. Okay, and they have to ensure that they sign license agreements that are more geographic specific, and also have narrower focus, so that it gives them a chance to explore these multiple corporate investors. And at the same time, they should select partners who have that financial liquidity, have that complementary innovations that can push their own technology to the market. And they should have a strong culture of IP protection and a track record of success working with startups. So with that, if we do that, then an ecosystem can approach can help spin-offs build a very robust, strategy for commercializing them by reducing the dependency risk. Of course, it's very complex because now you're dealing with multiple players and you have to figure out how to work with all of these players. So with that, I stop here. If there are any questions or anything that you want to ask, we can take that. Thank you.
Thanks, Hiran, for this wonderful cover of the entire topic. It was a huge one. If anyone wants to ask any questions, you can raise your hands. We can unmute you. Meanwhile, we have also pasted the feedback link in the chat box. Please do not leave the session without giving the feedback, because we would want to incorporate any suggestions that you have for the further talks. So till people are asking, Hiran, I'll just initiate it. So basically, you have indicated that geography wise also there would be a change in the technology strategy. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, in an Indian ecosystem, you would probably have a completely different strategy compared to probably if you're looking at it sitting in the US or in Europe, for example.
Right. So do you have any examples which, like, for example, a technology in India and then they flipped it to a different geography and their strategy changed? Any example which comes to your mind?
Well, I mean, today, if we look at the hydrogen market, right, there are a number of incentives being given in the US market. Any company who wants to do hydrogen now wants to be in the US because the ecosystem is quite attractive in terms of the incentives that are given and so on. And, the funding availability from investors and so on. But if you're trying to do the same thing in India, it's much harder because the amount of funding that's available for developing a hydrogen technology is less. The number of incumbents who are willing to collaborate with startups in this space is less. So there are a number of risks that a startup would have to deal with in the Indian ecosystem, right?
Right. Yeah. There are a few questions in the chat box. Twash wants to know how to analyze more in depth regarding a particular company and their working for making better decisions. Twash, do you want to unmute or to give little clarity? Yeah, you are unmuted, Twash.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask, like you said, we should know about the company which we are trying to license or, have some insight before we make a decision. So normally we have very few resources of knowing whether a company that we want to collaborate is good or bad based on this website and some readings which are available in the stock market. So I wanted to ask if we want to make a more better decision, like we need to be firm regarding our decision. We need some specific or strong reason to stand on it. So how can we learn about a particular company in more depth based on the resources that we have, like the net is the only resource we have then?
No, that's not the only resource you have. That's the first resource you have.
Yeah.
You have to find people in your network, so your advisors, your even your family members really who may know about that company. Maybe they know employees who have worked there, or they know people who are providing suppliers to that company, providing consulting services to this company. So anybody whom that company is interacting with will have an insight that may be relevant to you. So think of, a company is not growing in isolation. They have employees, they have consultants, they have suppliers, they have customers. And all of these people would have some insight about what the company is and how they are performing and whether it makes sense for you to engage with them. That will help you make that decision.
Thanks, Hiran.
Yeah.
Smita, do you want to unmute yourself? There are two questions that you wish to ask.
Yeah. Hi, Hiran. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Okay. My first question is, say we are talking to a company about collaboration, what part of technology do we disclose and what do we not disclose?
In your initial meetings, you're not actually discussing anything about technology. You're trying to tell them what is the value they will derive by working with you. It is more about conveying the value you can create for them. Or, if it is a customer discovery kind of interview, it's more about understanding how they are dealing with a particular issue for which you potentially have a solution, right? So you're talking about what are their pain points, what are some of the gains they want to get, and so on. So there is, at least in the first couple of sessions, it's more about them. It's not about you.
See, some of the meetings have been, the first question when you're discussing a technology or device, the question is, which sensor are you using?
But why are you starting there? You're saying, okay, I mean, this is a customer
not my
discovery.
question. It is not my question. It's the potential collaborators' question. They directly jump into the technology inside. What's inside this device? Which sensor are you using? From whom are you buying? I mean, these are like.
Yeah, so I mean, so you need to understand how to deflect these questions to get the information. So I mean, the thing is, why are they asking you about the sensor? What is it that's bothering them that is leading them to ask about the sensor? So try to get at that.
Okay.
If they're asking you first question is what the sensor, then I mean, why is that so important? If you don't know, ask them, why is that sensor so important? And I mean, why is, if you're asking about it, what are some of the challenges you're facing with that particular, unit that you're using? So try to kind of use that as the starting point for you to get at what their real issues are.
Okay, I got a feeling that they just want to know the inside of it. They probably are not very serious about the collaboration.
It may not be that. It is that they are facing some challenge with that particular issue that you have to figure out.
Okay, so basically you're saying that in the first few meetings, discuss business, but not the real technology or the.
Discuss their issues, discuss their problems, discuss what is the value you are trying to, you can provide them.
Okay, and then assuming the collaborator is evaluating whether to license technology or not, and they want to put a price on it. So whom do we approach? Because there are not many people in the technology evaluation part. Sometimes we do the business or the market evaluation and say this is the approximate price of the technology or the royalty.
Yeah, there are firms that can help you do the valuation of technology in a particular situation, like licensing, IP valuation can be done. For that particular situation, can be done. There are firms that do that.
So probably Smita and our team at Venture Center, the TechX team, they might be able to advise you.
Yeah.
You can write to us and we can discuss it offline.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have once again put the feedback link. Please put in your feedback there before you leave this session. Thanks, Hiran, for this wonderful session. Sorry for stepping over the time by 8 to 10 minutes. I hope you.
No worries at all.
Yeah. So,
my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, and wish everyone all the best. We will meet you next time on 14th of February, which is again a Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And the upcoming session is by Dr. Sinkar, and he's going to talk about only proposals for industry projects. So see you all next time on Tuesday, 14th of February at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.